You've found nightfall murmurs. When day fades into silence, the world begins to whisper. Some stories come as murmurs, some as warnings, but they all come at night. Don't be afraid to listen, but never listen alone. The day eternity first folded back upon itself began with the prosaic urgency of any Tuesday, yet concluded with the weight of ages settling into my unsteady grasp. An autumn chill bit the air, sharpening the edges of the morning as I navigated the bustling city pavement, chronically late, clutching lukewarm coffee and a worn satchel. Distracted by the rhythm of the crowd, I failed to register the slick kiss of black ice until my footing betrayed me. One instant, verticality. The next, a dizzying descent. My coffee painting a fleeting arc against the indifferent sky. I squeezed my eyes shut, anticipating the jarring impact. And then, stillness. An absolute cessation. The world hung suspended, a frozen tableau of urban hustle. Then, impossibly, the sequence reversed. My limbs unscrambled from their fall, the spilled liquid leaped back into its container, and I found myself upright again, a few paces shy of the treacherous patch. As motion seamlessly resumed around me, I stood rooted, a statue of bewilderment amidst the flow. Hallucination? A synapse misfiring under stress? Yet the ice patch remained, gleaming innocently, precisely where my memory insisted. This time, navigating around it, my thoughts churned like a storm-tossed sea. Work unfolded in a fugue state. Emails, meetings, the familiar drone of office life. All background noise to the roaring question within me. What sorcery was this? How had I invoked it? Could the phenomenon be summoned again? Lunchtime offered an unwelcome answer. In the sterile break room, awaiting the microwave's chime over my uninspired salad, Marcus from finance sauntered in. Marcus, whose personality was an abrasive blend of cheap cologne and unwarranted confidence, possessed a talent for inappropriate remarks. He zeroed in, his voice overloud. "Ilara, looking sharp. That outfit certainly highlights your contributions to the team." A flush of heat climbed my neck. Anger, humiliation. Impulse overriding caution, I retorted. "Keep your observations to yourself, Marcus. They're unprofessional and unwelcome." The break room's low hum ceased. Marcus's face tightened, flushing crimson. "Who the hell do you think?" And again, the world arrested. Then, the spool reversed. I watched, mesmerized, as his invective flew back into his throat, as his swaggering steps carried him backward out the door. Time snapped back to its proper course, leaving me alone beside the humming microwave. When Marcus entered this second time, I was prepared. Snatching my salad, I vacated the space before his gaze could even find me, the confrontation neatly excised from the timeline. Through the afternoon's remainder, I cautiously explored this nascent power. Concentration, a fierce act of will, could unravel the immediate past, peeling back up to 5 minutes of existence. It was a dizzying cocktail of exhilaration and profound dread. Minor errors vanished. A fumbled report corrected mid-fall. An awkward elevator silence rewound and filled with bland pleasantries. I even impressed my supervisor, preempting a looming project snag moments before it surfaced. Yet, walking home beneath the bruised twilight sky, the enormity began to press down. The ability to sculpt the immediate past, to erase, to mend, to subtly reshape the unfolding present, it felt like wielding a sliver of the divine, a power pregnant with potential for both immense good and catastrophic misuse. Weeks bleed into one another, colored by my internal debate. The ethics of temporal manipulation became a constant companion. I deployed the ability sparingly, confining it to trivialities, averting a splashed puddle, sidestepping an aggressive pedestrian, rescuing a dropped mug from shattering. Still, a persistent unease lingered, a whisper that more was demanded of me. Then came the afternoon that fractured everything. Lost in contemplation on my usual route home, the shriek of tortured tires sliced through the city's ambient drone. My head snapped up. A vehicle, wildly out of control, mounted the curb, hurtling toward a cluster of schoolchildren awaiting their bus. Instinctively, desperately, I reached inward for the rewind, willing time to reverse, to negate the impending horror. Nothing. The flow remained stubbornly linear. The world refused to bend. Powerless, I witnessed the sickening impact. The aftermath was a chaotic vortex of screams, sirens, and the metallic tang of fear. When the immediate maelstrom subsided, the cost lay bare. 2 young lives extinguished, others broken, and I, the woman who could rewind moments, had been utterly unable to intervene. Guilt and confusion became my shroud in the ensuing days. Why had the power failed precisely when it mattered most? Did it possess hidden limitations, cruel exceptions? Or was this the universe's brutal lesson in immutable fate? An obsession took root to map the contours of this strange gift. Relentless testing followed. I discovered emotional turmoil acted as static, disrupting the connection. Panic or acute distress rendered the rewind mechanism sluggish, sometimes inert. The temporal reach also demanded a physical price. Pulling back the full 5 minutes left me drained, trembling with exhaustion. Wrestling with these revelations, the burden of responsibility intensified. Each temporal adjustment, however minor, rippled outward, potentially altering trajectories in unknowable ways. Was it my right to play editor to reality's script? Sleepless nights were populated by heroic fantasies, averted disasters, lives saved, inevitably chased by nightmares of unintended consequences, of reality unraveling under my touch. The reckoning arrived roughly a month after the power's first manifestation. Seeking solace on a rare day off, I sat in a bustling coffee shop, letting the steam from my latte and the anonymous chatter wash over me. Then, from the adjacent table, fragments of a low, urgent phone conversation snagged my attention. "Yeah, locked in," a man murmured. "The device is set. Maya starts talking. Bang. Pure chaos." Ice water sluiced through my veins. A bomb? An attack? A glance at my watch confirmed the mayor's scheduled address at City Hall, less than an hour away. Indecision paralyzed me. Call the authorities? Would they credit an overheard, fragmented warning? Could they act swiftly enough? Then the knowledge surged back. I possessed the means to stop this, to rewind far enough to prevent the plot's fruition. But 5 minutes was laughably insufficient. This required a deeper plunge, further than I had ever dared. Drawing a breath that felt scraped from my very lungs, I focused my entire being, pouring every quantum of will into the rewind. The coffee shop dissolved into a backward-flowing blur, events collapsing in reverse at vertiginous speed. I pushed, teeth clenched against the mounting strain, the world a chaotic rewind. 15 minutes, 20, 30. Agony spiked behind my eyes. Just as my resolve threatened to shatter, the world snapped violently back into sharp focus. I stood outside the coffee shop, the time on my phone confirming I had clawed back 45 minutes. No hesitation, I dialed emergency services. "A bomb!" I gasped, the words tumbling out. "City Hall, Mayor's speech. You need to get there now." The subsequent hour stretched into an eternity. Heart hammering against my ribs, I watched remotely as news alerts painted a picture of swarming police, a cordoned City Hall. They located the explosive device, concealed within a decorative planter near the podium. The architect of the averted horror was apprehended attempting to melt back into the city. That evening, watching news reports replay the scenes of disruption and relief, a strange admixture of profound gratitude and chilling fear settled within me. Lives were undeniably saved, but the cost resonated physically, a deep, aching fatigue in every muscle, a persistent throb behind my temples. More profoundly, the sheer scale of my intervention was staggering. I had not merely smoothed a personal wrinkle in time, I had fundamentally altered a public event, rewriting a potentially tragic headline. The implications felt vast, terrifying. In the quiet wake of the city's relieved buzz, I forged a pact with myself. This power could not be ignored, nor could it be wielded lightly. Boundaries were essential. Henceforth, its use would be reserved solely for dire emergencies, for moments when life itself hung in the balance. No more trivial corrections, no more manipulations for convenience or personal gain, and always the potential repercussions, the unforeseen ripples, must be weighed with solemn care. Years have passed since that pivotal day in the coffee shop. The power remains, a silent, secret current beneath the surface of my life. Its call has come rarely, a collision averted, a violent mugging interrupted. Once, stretching moments to allow a dying man a final, precious farewell with his family. Each instance carries the familiar weight, the profound gravity of tampering with the ordained sequence. Yet, I have also come to perceive it as a unique stewardship, a fragile opportunity to inject mercy into the relentless march of time. Living with this secret, navigating these impossible choices, is a solitary burden, but glimpsing the faces of those unknowingly spared, contemplating the tragedies forestalled, affirms the necessity. Why this power was bestowed upon me, or how long it will last, remains shrouded in mystery. But for as long as the past remains pliable in my hands, I will strive to wield this strange gift with wisdom, to honor the profound value of each moment. For ultimately, that is the universal task, to make the most of the time we are given, whether its flow is ours to command or not. Whispers slithered through the iron arteries of the Havenwood, not the usual groans of settling timbers or the gurgle of ancient plumbing I knew intimately after 8 years tending this grand, decaying dame built in 22. No, these were threads of conversation, tangled and faint, seeping from the very plaster of apartment 4B, where I knelt before a weeping bathroom pipe. Routine work, or so I'd thought. Mrs. Albright, the current occupant, had entrusted me with her key, off on some daytime errand. I pressed my ear to the cool, tiled wall, tracing the phantom sound. The susurrus coalesced, vaguely male and female, yet the words remained stubbornly indistinct, a rhythm without melody. Silence answered my knock upon the cool tile, nothing but the drip-drip from the corroded joint I was there to mend. Pulling out my phone, I consulted the brittle blueprints. Schematic purity dictated solid wall adjoining foray. No cavities, no conduits large enough for sound to carry so clearly. But the Havenwood held secrets the draftsman never recorded. Sealed passages, phantom windows, entire chambers swallowed by forgotten renovations. This building breathed history, and sometimes it held its breath. Retrieving my kit, I began liberating the tired, web-cracked tiles. The grout surrendered with a powdery sigh. 4 tiles down, my hammer struck not plaster, but void. A careful excavation followed, crumbling lath yielding to shadow. My beam sliced through decades of stillness, illuminating a narrow cavity, choked with dust motes dancing in the artificial sun. Cobwebs draped like spectral shrouds. Shapes lurked just beyond the light's reach. Big enough now. I inhaled the stale breath of the past and squeezed inside. Confined, barely room to pivot, the air thick as velvet dust. My light snagged on metal, glinting low. A tin coffer, shoebox-sized, grimed with age. Beside it slumped a leather satchel, its hide cracked like drought-stricken earth. The whispers were gone now, replaced by the rasp of my own lungs, and the grit underfoot. The tin, dense with unexpected weight, resisted, its lid fused by rust until my screwdriver forced it. Inside lay bundled sheaves of currency, faces from a forgotten era staring blankly, bound by perished rubber that crumbled at my touch. Thousands, easily. The satchel disgorged a tangle of gold. Chains, rings, timepieces, dulled but undeniably precious. Beneath it all, a small ledger, its pages brittle and ambered. Trembling fingers coaxed open the ledger. Faded ink bled across the page. 15 June 47. Delivery complete, midnight sharp. R says quiet times needed. Harrison's score drew too much heat. Proceeds handsome though, best yet. 12,000 apiece, split 3 ways. Not shabby. Constabulary clueless, babbling of burglary sprees. Keep heads down, lips sealed, we're untouchable. My hands shook now. Page after fragile page chronicled nearly 2 years of calculated plunder. Jewelers, estates, even a bank vault yielded their secrets. Names, dates, acquisitions, shadowed initials. The script ended abruptly in April 49. Trouble brewing. R missed contact. 3 days silent. S reports watchers near his place. Betrayal hangs heavy. Must relocate the cache. Retrieve when the storm passes. But the storm never passed for them. 75 years, this horde had waited in the dark. Footfalls echoed from the apartment beyond. Mrs. Albright returning prematurely. A frantic scramble, coffer, satchel, ledger vanished back into the void. Tiles clumsily pressed into place. A poor disguise needing proper mortar later. Mr. Thorne, are you still occupied? Her voice drifted in. Just concluding, I called back, the words catching in my throat. Had to investigate behind the tiles, Mrs. Albright. Found some dampness affecting the supports. requires a more thorough repair tomorrow. Oh heavens, is it dire? Merely the complaints of an old system, I reassured, gathering my tools with hands that refused to still. I'll return at dawn with the necessary materials. The drive home was a blur, my thoughts a frantic storm. 50,000? More? A fortune in forgotten spoils slumbering within spitting distance of Mrs. Albright's morning coffee. Stolen goods, yes, but ghosts of crime 75 years cold. Whose claim held water now? Sleep offered no refuge, haunted by phantom whispers. Auditory tricks of aged architecture, or had I truly heard dialogue seep through solid brick and plaster? The blueprints insisted otherwise. Dawn found me rapping on 4B's door. Mrs. Albright, enveloped in her housecoat, admitted me with a surprised murmur. Promptness itself, Mr. Thorne. Best to address damp before it settles deeper, I replied. Once her footsteps faded down the hall, for her constitutional, I made straight for the bathroom. The replaced tiles screamed their newness. Cosmetic work could wait. First, confirmation. As the tiles came away again, the voices returned, sharper this time, chillingly distinct. They'll discover us. They always do. A second voice, harsh. Silence. Too long past. No one remembers. Ice traced my spine. The sound emanated from the hidden niche. Impossible. I'd explored its entirety yesterday. A cramped dead end. My light pierced the enlarged opening. The coffer and satchel remained undisturbed. But now, footprints marred the thick dust. Fresh prints, leading towards the back wall, a wall I knew was solid terminus. Yet the prints marched toward it. Not mine. Panic urged retreat, urged calls to authority. Instead, drawn by horrified curiosity, I slid back into the suffocating space. The footprints ended where solid brick met my outstretched hand. But under pressure, it yielded. A seam, invisible moments before, widened. A hidden door, masterfully concealed. Harsher now, the whispers clawed. An intruder! Conceal it, quickly! I shoved. The hidden panel groaned open on corroded hinges, revealing absolute blackness. My flashlight carved an arc through the void, illuminating not a niche, but a chamber. Perhaps 12 feet square, raw brick walls, concrete underfoot, and occupied. Two shapes huddled in the far corner, draped in the fashion of the 40s, layered in decades of fine gray dust. Their faces were hollowed, ash pale, eyes like burnt sockets fixed upon me, unblinking. I recoiled, skull cracking against the low entrance. My beam wavered, passing through them as if slicing smoke. Phantoms, impossible, yet undeniably present. This sanctuary was not meant for your eyes, the woman breathed, her voice a rustle of dried leaves. Sealed against discovery, the man affirmed, his tone flat, dead. The pipes, I stammered, heart battering my ribs. I'm just fixing the pipes. Deceiver! The woman hissed, venom etching the whisper. You sought the spoils. They always return for the spoils. A cold dread prompted the question I didn't want answered. How many others found this? The man offered a smile devoid of warmth, revealing teeth unnaturally bright against the gloom. Sufficient numbers, Avarice is an unerring guide. It leads them in, but rarely out. Terror ignited. I fled, dropped the light, slammed against the narrow passage walls, skin tearing on rough brick. Behind me, their laughter erupted, no longer muffled whispers, but sharp glacial shards of sound pursuing me into the brightly lit normality of Mrs. Albright's bathroom. Dust and the grave's chill clung to me as I burst into the hallway, down the stairs, not stopping until I was behind the wheel of my truck, engine roaring, hands trembling too violently to engage the gears. From the relative safety of the parking lot, I phoned the building superintendent, babble about severe water damage, potential structural compromise, the necessity of opening the entire wall. "Get some contractor estimates, Thorne," came the weary reply. "We'll look at it next month when the budget renews." I resigned that afternoon, found employment across the city, supervising the predictable mechanics of modern constructions, structures whose walls respected architectural drawings, whose pipes carried only water, not whispers. Yet, in the quiet hours, the voices sometimes return, echoing not through iron, but within the chambers of my own mind. I ponder the others, the ones ensnared by greed, the ones who didn't flee. That ledger haunts my sleep. Do spectral hands add new entries below that final 1949 scrawl? A grim accounting of souls lost to avarice within those hidden walls? The Havenwood still presides over its corner, its ancient plumbing eternally failing, eternally demanding attention. Occasionally, my route takes me past. I glance towards the 4th floor, towards the windows of Theo 4B. Sometimes, shadows flicker behind the glass. Sometimes, I imagine a wave. I never return the gesture. Telling someone, the authorities, the preservationists, crosses my mind. But credibility strains against such a tale, and pity the poor soul sent to verify, the next hapless custodian lured by whispers. No, better the secret remains entombed, the voices indistinct, the dust undisturbed. So, if your work leads you into the bones of some time-worn edifice, and you perceive murmurs where only pipes should be, heed this counsel. Tend to the task at hand, mend the leak, patch the plaster, but probe no further. Certain voids demand solitude. Certain treasures court disaster. Should you unearth forgotten wealth, return it to the shadows. Reseal the breach. Depart. The whispers may entice, may promise fortunes, may weave illusions. Resist them. Avert your gaze. Refuse their offerings. For such hidden chambers exist for cause, and sometimes the cause lingers, watching, waiting, patiently anticipating the next curious soul, the next greedy heart. I escaped. Sheer luck, sheer terror. But those entities in the dark, they possess an eternity. Time means nothing. Inevitably, another will hear the call through the walls. Another's curiosity will bloom into avarice, and perhaps that next one. Perhaps they won't possess the speed to outrun the silence that follows the laughter. That evening remains etched, crystalline, in memory. Silence draped the cafe, pierced only by the groan of aged floorboards beneath our feet, as Elias and I lingered, weary from the day's toil. The lights, low and amber, seemed to struggle against the encroaching gloom. Though the clock wasn't pressing, an insistent tremor deep within urged haste. A curious weight pressed down. The air felt dense, viscous, the illumination insufficient. Alone within the bones of that historic structure, every trivial noise, a settling joist, the sigh of old wood, reverberated, amplified, down the shadowed corridors. Once, twice, a muted concussion near the kitchen snagged my ear, dismissed almost instantly. My attention burrowed into the crisp paper and cool metal before me, a mantra of counting, a prayer for swift departure. 6 months Elias and I had served coffee and pastries within these walls, a building whose notoriety stemmed less from its menu and more from its sheer antiquity. Its stairwells protested every footfall, ancient timbers webbed the ceilings, and inexplicable alcoves punctuated the layout, architectural oddities seemingly devoid of function. The proprietor had carved a dining space from the ground floor's heart, tucking the kitchen into an adjacent chamber. Beyond lay a long, dim passage, tunneling towards a storeroom and a pair of perpetually locked doors concealing unknown spaces. Whispers circulated among the staff, fleeting apparitions glimpsed at the hallway's terminus, disembodied murmurs when solitude should have reigned. Hauntings, some insisted. Raised pragmatically, I'd always anchored my belief in the tangible, dismissing anxieties born of shadows and silence. 11 o'clock chimed somewhere beyond our walls. The cafe, vacant for a good hour past our usual 10 o'clock closing, held only us and the residue of the day. Elias hunched over the till, his fingers sorting currency. I reconciled credit slips, the silence profound, amplifying our fatigue. Only the low thrum of the kitchen's ancient refrigerator and a barely perceptible sizzle from the overhead lamps disturbed the quiet, punctuated occasionally by the metallic tick of the heating system, rousing itself against the evening chill. Then I saw Elias's gaze flicker, drawn magnetically towards the hallway yawning to our left. He went utterly still, a statue for a heartbeat, before a slight shake of his head returned him to the money. "All right?" I murmured. "Just tired," he replied, the word thick, unconvincing. A knot formed in my gut, mirroring the tension I tried to ignore in his voice. That's when the sound reached me, a thin, abrasive scrup emanating from the kitchen's direction, like a wooden chair leg dragged protesting across the floorboards, just an inch or two. Abruptly, it ceased. I held my breath, listening intently. Elias met my wide eyes across the counter. "Did you hear that?" My whisper felt loud. He gave a slow, deliberate nod, setting the banknotes aside. A silent gesture urged me forward. We moved with unnatural slowness towards the kitchen threshold, my pulse a frantic drum against my ribs, palms slick with sudden dampness. Just the old house settling, I told myself, uneven floors. Yet the sound had possessed a volition, a crisp intention absent from mere structural groans. We crossed into the kitchen, utterly mundane. Chairs tucked neatly beneath the staff break table, surfaces wiped clean, sinks gleaming faintly, refrigerator doors sealed. Nothing amiss. A relieved sigh escaped me. "Just the building," I offered, turning to retreat. And then the chuckle, low, dry, rasping, impossibly close, as if someone stood just beside my shoulder. It wasn't loud, yet it filled the space, immediate, intimate, devoid of echo. Elias's eyes locked with mine, pupils huge in the dimness. A prickling sensation crawled up my arms, my stomach clenched into a knot of ice. Male, female, impossible to discern, but the tone was unmistakable. Derisive amusement. Thought dissolved, instinct took over. I bolted. Elias was a shadow at my heels. We flew towards the entrance, snatched our phones from the counter, and burst into the night air, gasping. 10 seconds, maybe less. My lungs burned. Elias fumbled with his phone, dialing emergency services with shaking fingers. I stared back through the glass door, heart hammering against my sternum, half expecting a silhouette to detach itself from the interior shadows, illuminated faintly by the few lights we'd left burning. But there was only stillness, utter vacancy. Never had a sound felt so tangible, so present, in a room proven empty. 15 minutes stretched before patrol car lights painted the street. 2 officers listened patiently as Elias recounted the disembodied laughter, my own affirmation following his. Keys? Only the owner and Ms. Thorne, the day manager, possessed them, we assured them. Thoroughly, methodically, they swept through the building, flooding each room with light. Closets yielded nothing, windows remained secured. Even the dust lay undisturbed in the forgotten corners and the cramped attic space above the kitchen. No forced entry, no intruders. They weren't dismissive precisely, yet a subtle air suggested they filed it under old building noises, spooked employees. Lock up, go home, call if it happens again. Standard procedure. The following morning, mortification warred with the need to share. News, predictably, spread like spilled coffee among the staff. A few nodded. They had heard whispers near that hallway, attributing them to drafts or the building's groans. Clara confessed to hearing phantom footsteps pacing the dining room long after closing. Finn, another barista, had once claimed he saw a chair shift unaided near the storeroom, a story largely discounted until now. Perhaps Elias and I conceded silently. Finn hadn't been imagining things. In the subsequent weeks, Elias and I navigated our evening shifts with a forced nonchalance that frayed thin after 9 o'clock. The familiar knot of anxiety would tighten in my chest. Minor disturbances became almost commonplace. Cups inexplicably tumbled from shelves, not once, but with unsettling frequency, prompting checks of levelness and temperature that revealed no cause. Sometimes, absorbed in wiping down counters, a susurrus would brush my ear, soft as exhaled breath. The words indistinct before vanishing the moment I turned. An undeniable sensation of being observed often accompanied solitary tasks, particularly acute in the cramped, perpetually chilly pantry nestled off the infamous hallway. Closing time, another quiet evening. I lingered in the small back office, wrestling with paperwork while Elias tidied the kitchen. The rest had departed. My office door stood ajar, offering a sliver of the hallway view if I leaned just so. Concentration proved elusive. A persistent edginess kept my gaze drifting upwards. Then, a soft tap, tap against the wall just outside my door. Not the groan of pipes or settling wood. It sounded distinctly like knuckles rapping on the timber paneling. Once a pause, then again. I rose, heart quickening, and peered into the corridor. Empty. The single overhead bulb cast a weak flickering light, deepening the shadows in the corners. "Elias?" My voice felt thin. Silence answered. "Elias!" Louder this time. Nothing. Hesitantly, I moved down the passage towards the bend leading to the storeroom. Its door, usually left open, was shut tight. A faint, dry rustling whispered from within. My hand closed over the cool metal knob. It refused to turn. Locked. Strange. We never secured this door. Feeling foolish, I knocked lightly. "Elias? You in there?" The rustling ceased abruptly. No reply. As I turned, ready to dismiss it, Elias's voice sounded from behind me, approaching from the kitchen entrance. "You calling me?" I nearly leaped from my skin, whirling around. "Come here, look!" Together, we tried the storeroom door again. Firmly locked, we fumbled through our keyrings. None fit the unfamiliar lock. Elias swore he hadn't touched it all evening. We stood baffled for a silent moment when, sharp and sudden, the doorknob rattled violently. A brief, metallic clatter, as if someone on the other side desperately worked the latch. My stomach lurched, tremors started in my hands. Elias's face went ashen. He instinctively pulled me back a step. We stared, transfixed, waiting for the knob to turn, for the door to swing open. Then, absolute silence returned. Elias cautiously reached out, testing the handle once more. Immovable. The air felt thick with unseen pressure. We didn't need words to agree. We retreated swiftly from the hallway, extinguished the necessary lights, secured the main entrance, and fled. Sleep offered little refuge that night, the phantom rattle echoing in my mind. Days later, I cautiously broached the subject with Ms. Thorne. She sighed, admitting others had quit over the years, citing an unshakable discomfort within the building. The owner, she added, remained resolutely silent on the matter, though she harbored her own suspicions about the property's past. Elias, spurred by curiosity, suggested delving into local history. Our online searches yielded fragments, mentions of a family inhabiting the house in the late 19th century, vague blog posts speculating about foundations laid upon even older ruins, but concrete details, records of tragedy or misfortune that might anchor the unease, remained elusive. The phenomena persisted, selective, favoring the quiet hours, the solitary moments, particularly near that damnable hallway, the artery leading to the storeroom, the pantry, those two sealed chambers. Staff increasingly avoided it. Clara wouldn't fetch supplies from back there without an escort, confessing to the persistent sensation of eyes boring into her back. One evening, necessity forced Elias and me to stay late again for a full inventory. We resolved to stay close, clipboards in hand, moving through the silent building. Dining room lights were out, but we kept the kitchen and corridor illuminated against the pressing dark. My pulse remained stubbornly elevated, every creak setting my nerves on edge, anticipating the laugh, the tapping. Elias was equally tense, his head constantly swiveling, peering around corners. We completed the tally, ready to retreat to the front, when a low, indistinct sound reached us from the vicinity of the pantry. A mumble, perhaps a single garbled word, like someone muttering resentfully just beyond hearing. We both froze. I took a hesitant step closer. The sound died instantly. Pushing the pantry door inward, I fumbled for the switch, flooding the small space with weak light. Shelves laden with tins, sacks of coffee, jars of sugar, all perfectly ordinary. No one there. Elias crowded in behind me. We stood for several heartbeats, the only sound our own shallow breathing, listening. Silence. As we turned to exit, something definite, tangible, brushed against my calf. A distinct pressure, a tug on my trousers. A startled cry escaped me as I lurched forward, stumblers into Elias. He caught my arm as I spun, aiming my phone's beam at the floor around my feet. Empty space. "What happened?" Elias whispered, his voice tight. "Something touched me," I stammered. He didn't doubt it. He'd seen my reaction, felt the jolt of my panic. That was it. Enough. We secured the premises and were gone near midnight. Such incidents became part of the cafe's rhythm, sporadic yet persistent. A co-worker might report a disembodied whisper, an object might shift or fall without cause. Logical explanations remained stubbornly elusive. I stayed. The paycheck was essential, and a strange camaraderie had formed amidst the shared tension. Elias remained too, his fear perhaps matched by a morbid curiosity. We spoke of leaving naturally, yet a certain obstinacy kept us tethered to the place. I work there still. The old house stands unchanged, so too it seems does its peculiar disquiet. The owner offers only denial. Some nights pass in uneventful quiet. On others, doors latch themselves, faint voices drift from empty rooms, or that chilling soft laughter emanates from the corridor's depths. Coping has become a strategy of vigilance. Stay alert, stick with Elias whenever possible, finish tasks efficiently, yet stepping into that hallway after hours invariably tightens a cold fist in my gut. Muscles clench, my mouth goes dry, a tremor sometimes visits my hands. Is it a complex prank? Residual echoes of long-past lives? Something else entirely? The questions remain unanswered. What I know, with visceral certainty, is the feeling of that cold touch, the sound of voices where none should be. Phenomena that defy reason for me, for Elias, for all of us who share those late hours. We lock the doors, reconcile the day's earnings, and retreat as swiftly as decency allows. No lingering in the back rooms, no tempting fate by investigating bumps in the night. We manage by moving quickly, staying watchful. But the memory of that intimate, mocking laughter in the kitchen is indelible. A scar on the psyche, a constant reminder that certain walls hold secrets impervious to explanation. And every time the old house sighs or settles in the quiet, I wonder if true ease will ever be possible again within its embrace. Who foresees stark terror blooming from the soil of a cut-rate seaside escape? Not I, Leo, nor my companions, Finn and Sam, when we secured that coastal derelict for a weekend's reprieve. The bargain price whispered promises of simplicity, the proximity to the surf, a mere half-kilometer stroll, seemed compensation enough for anticipated shabbiness. Our desires were modest, the rhythm of waves, respite from urban clamor, freedom from the tyranny of the clock. Yet, crossing the threshold that afternoon unleashed a tide of disillusionment, a miasma of stale, imprisoned air, thick with neglect, assaulted the senses. Filaments of spider silk festooned the corners. Weeping stains bloomed on the plaster. The acrid scent provoked an involuntary scrub at my nose. The cramped living space hosted a haphazard scattering of exhausted furniture. A sofa bleached of its original hue, a coffee table scarred with history's careless graffiti. Though the kitchen presented a facade of utility, the refrigerator droned a monotonous complaint that grated instantly. Aesthetics were secondary. Function, however precarious, was paramount. We distributed our belongings between two sleeping chambers. My chosen room featured a bed frame that groaned under the slightest pressure, protesting the weight of my rucksack. The second offered marginally better prospects, though its mattress bore the sag of countless previous occupants. A forgotten back room served as a mausoleum for skeletal chairs and anonymous boxes veiled in dust. Gritty particles coated the floorboards, prompting us to fling open windows, inviting a reluctant breeze. Beyond the panes, the yard surrendered to neglect. Lank grasses whispered against the rear fence. Defiant weeds choked the approach to the front gate, an imposing structure of shoulder-high iron bars, secured from within by a loop of corroded chain. A brief reconnaissance of the environs confirmed a pervasive vacancy. Structures dotted the landscape, many bearing the vacant stares of broken windows or the blindfolds of boarded-up entrances. Others stood dark and inert, driveways barren. This coastal pocket, ostensibly primed for holidaymakers, felt hollowed out, deserted despite the nearby murmur of the sea. No commerce hummed, no cafes spilled laughter onto the pavement, no figures ambled along the lanes. An unsettling stillness clung to the air. "Don't bank on a local shop, Finn," I remarked, the odd quietude prickling my senses. "Provisions likely mean a trip inland." He concurred, acknowledging the wisdom of stocking up before twilight claimed the day. 10 minutes by car delivered us to a meager market, its interior shrouded in perpetual twilight, offering essentials along a solitary aisle. We gathered bottled water, fizzy drinks, bread, the makings of simple sandwiches. Presiding over this dim domain was a proprietor whose silence was as profound as his watchful stillness, arms folded across his chest. Transaction complete, we retreated to our temporary dwelling. The sun bled towards the horizon, its descent mirrored by a rising wind that carried the damp, briny breath of the ocean, a scent that mingled uncomfortably with the house's own stagnant perfume upon our return. Night fell utterly. No constellations of streetlights pierced the blackness here. Illumination was confined to our feeble porch bulb and a solitary glimmer in the hall. Within, the living room's overhead fixture offered scant, occasionally sputtering light. Our phones remained close, potential beacons in the gloom. We huddled around the scarred coffee table, dealing cards, consuming sandwiches in near silence. Through ill-fitting window frames, the wind sang its mournful dirge, a constant reminder of our profound seclusion. Towards 10, the wind escalated its assault. Glass panes chattered in the kitchen, the back door shuddered in its frame. I rose, compelled to verify the lock. Secured, yes, but the ancient wood felt disturbingly frail. Peering through the kitchen window yielded only impenetrable darkness. The yard was a void, the fence a barely discernible silhouette against the ink-black canvas. Overhead, clouds smothered the moon, muting its already feeble glow. Seeking distraction, we convened around Finn's laptop, extinguishing the overhead light for better viewing. An amorphous disquiet lingered, which I attributed to the alien surroundings, though neither Finn, perpetually glancing at his phone, nor Sam, whose foot drummed a nervous rhythm, seemed at ease. Half an hour elapsed before a muted impact resonated from the rear of the house. Windfall, I assumed initially, pausing the film. Silence descended, amplifying the thrum of my own blood. Then again, a sequence of dull thuds against the exterior wall, irregular, like pebbles flung or knuckles rapping wood. "Hear that?" I breathed, my voice tight. Finn and Sam affirmed with tense nods. We rose, chairs scraping softly despite our caution. Stealthily, I approached the rear window, straining my eyes against the gloom. Movement flickered near the fence line. Dark forms coalesced, 3 figures swathed in hooded jackets. A glacial current coursed through me. My gut clenched. They occupied our rented ground. One stooped, retrieved an object, and hurled it against the siding, the source of the unnerving percussion. A guttural shout followed, indistinct but laden with aggression. Another figure detached, prowling closer along the side of the house. "What now?" Finn hissed, his voice taut. I silenced him with a gesture, desperate to maintain the illusion of unawareness. Moments later, more voices sliced through the wind. "Who's in there?" The query lacked the slur of intoxication. It carried the sharp edge of a challenge. My heart hammered against my ribs. Retreating cautiously from the window, avoiding any telltale silhouette, I watched Sam bolt the front door. Finn returned from the kitchen, pressing a knife into my hand, keeping one for himself. The cold steel felt alien, unwelcome, yet necessary. Sweat slicked my palms. My tongue felt thick and dry. Abruptly, a metallic jangle erupted from the front, the gate chain being tested. "Anyone home?" bellowed a voice, punctuated by low laughter from the others. This wasn't aimless mischief. It was targeted, predatory. Stealing to the living room window, I peered through a gap in the curtains. The weak porch light cast long shadows, revealing a hooded figure yanking at the rusted chain, face obscured by shadow or cloth. They circled like wolves, their boots grinding on unseen gravel as they moved towards the rear again. Ear pressed to the thin wall, I strained to decipher their words against the wind's howl. Fragments surfaced. "Check the door." "Look over there." My thoughts scattered like frightened birds. Fumbling for my phone, I dialed the local constabulary. A weary female voice answered. I relayed our predicament, our location, the urgency. "A single patrol car," she informed me, hampered by the holiday weekend rush, but dispatched nonetheless. Frustration warred with terror. "How long?" The question hung unanswered. Outside, the siege continued. Footsteps prowled, hands tested window latches, doors rattled under tentative pressure. Then, the back doorknob twisted. A metallic click, a jiggle, back and forth. I froze, breath trapped in my chest, mere inches away. Finn stood rigid behind me, his knuckles white around the knife hilt. Sam maintained his vigil at the front. Each second stretched into an eternity, devoid of sirens. Worries swarmed, shattering glass, splintering wood, the glint of unseen weapons tucked into pockets or beneath jackets. The unknown gnawed relentlessly. My chest constricted with every gust of wind that animated the shadows, every rustle of unseen leaves mimicking footsteps. A sudden, violent kick against the side wall sent a concussive thump reverberating through the structure. Finn flinched, a curse escaping his lips before I could stifle him, fearful any sound from within would escalate their aggression. I glanced at my phone. Only 10 minutes since the call. An aeon had passed. My pulse hammered, a frantic drumbeat in my ears. Through the window, a narrow beam sliced the darkness. A flashlight wielded by one of the figures outside. It swept methodically across the overgrown yard, illuminated the porch steps, lingered on the windows. I recoiled behind the wall, heart pounding. The beam danced across the property once more, then winked out. Muffled voices conferred outside. Straining to hear, I caught only wind-whipped fragments. No lights. Maybe inside. Keep checking. The oppressive tension mounted. An ache bloomed in my back from the sustained crouch. My legs trembled. My breath came in shallow gasps. "Call again?" Finn whispered. I shook my head, wary of the phone's revealing glow, urgent patience. Another 5 minutes crawled by, punctuated by the heavy tread of boots circling the house. The front gate chain rattled anew, followed by footsteps crunching near the wall. Sam crept close, silently mouthing, "Leaving?" I offered only a helpless shake of my head. The situation remained opaque, chaotic. Then a low thrum surfaced on the edge of hearing, swelling steadily. Headlight beams sliced across the periphery of the yard. The approaching patrol car. The figures outside heard it too. A flurry of urgent, hushed exchanges reached us. They scrambled towards the rear boundary. A metallic clang. The fence? Then the frantic tattoo of running feet receding into the blackness beyond the house. A dizzying surge of relief, tainted by residual dread, washed through me, threatening to buckle my knees. We remained frozen, silent, until the flashing red and blue strobed through the windows as the police vehicle halted out front. 2 officers emerged, their flashlights cutting arcs through the night. "Police!" came the call. We unbolted the door, admitting them into the stale air. My explanation tumbled out, fueled by adrenaline. A sweep of the grounds yielded little. The intruders had vanished utterly. Footprints marred the soft earth near the fence. Faint scuffs marked the walls, but no breaches, no tangible damage. The officers promised sporadic patrols, tempered by the demands of the holiday weekend and limited resources. "Keep the lights on, lock everything tight," they advised. Such incidents, one remarked grimly, weren't unheard of in these isolated stretches, especially when law enforcement was stretched thin. Their response time, regrettably, was often compromised. When the cruiser departed, silence descended once more, heavy and unnerving. We stood adrift in the living room, gazes meeting, unspoken anxieties hanging between us. Sam chafed his arms as if warding off a chill. Finn slumped onto the sofa, a long sigh escaping him. I felt utterly depleted, muscles trembling as if after a desperate sprint. The prospect of another night here was intolerable, yet navigating unfamiliar roads past midnight seemed equally unwise. Dawn, we resolved, would be our escape signal. We barricaded the flimsy back door with a cumbersome cabinet, resecured every window, wedged chairs beneath doorknobs, and left the flickering living room, light burning defiantly against the dark. Rest was a fiction. Sleep, a fleeting visitor. I drifted into a shallow doze for perhaps an hour, jolted awake by every creak and groan of the old house, my heart resuming its frantic cadence. First light witnessed our frantic exodus. Possessions were hurled into bags, cleanliness forsaken. We loaded the car with automaton speed, locked the cursed house behind us, and fled. The return journey unfolded in strained silence, the night's terrors replaying relentlessly in my mind's eye. The sudden appearance of those hooded shapes, the methodical probing of our fragile defenses, the suffocating helplessness while awaiting aid. My hands still trembled on the steering wheel. Recounting the ordeal later yielded sympathy, but no answers. Were they would-be burglars, opportunistic predators, something else entirely? The official report gathered dust, a closed file on an unsolved disturbance. The experience etched itself onto my caution. Now, in unfamiliar lodgings, I test locks with obsessive rigor, heed the faintest whisper of intuition. That single night bred a lasting vigilance, a hyper-awareness. Even now, the memory of dull impacts against a damp, neglected wall triggers a visceral clenching deep within, an indelible echo of fear I cannot erase. A peculiar cold greeted me the instant I crossed the threshold into the living room that morning. A chill entirely out of place amidst the shroud-like plastic sheeting that mummified the furniture and the raw, half-stripped walls, breathing renovation dust. It wasn't the draftiness of construction. It felt older, more deliberate. Silas, the man I'd contracted, a fellow whose hands were maps of labor and whose eyes held the steady calm of deep water, beckoned me over. He gestured, not with alarm, but with a kind of weary curiosity, towards an unnerving aperture in the plaster. It hadn't existed yesterday. No architect had dreamed it onto a blueprint. Barely 3 inches across, its perimeter was irregularly chipped, less like damage and more like the wall had organically fractured, birthing this small, dark maw. An inexplicable dread prickled at the base of my skull. Trying to cloak my disquiet, I watched Silas regard the anomaly. "Never seen the like," he murmured, his voice gravelly but certain. "We'll seal it up come tomorrow." He radiated a practicality that felt alien to the strangeness before us. I offered a mute nod, lacking any better response. Yet an internal tremor persisted, a low hum of anxiety. Drawn by some morbid pull, I approached the opening, laying my palm flat against the surrounding wall. Colder, distinctly colder than the ambient air. Just the house breathing, I rationalized, wind finding an undiscovered fissure. Silas slapped a patch of masking tape over the hole, a flimsy bandage on an unknown wound, promising resolution with the dawn. He departed, leaving me adrift in the renovation's chaos. Evening bled into night, the apartment a labyrinth of displaced objects, paint tins standing sentinel beside a leaning ladder. Reaching the kitchen required careful navigation. The living room swam in gloom. I'd removed bulbs earlier, weary of the glare. Now only the frantic strobe of a faulty street lamp animated the space, sending shadows skittering like startled insects across the shrouded forms and wounded walls. I sought refuge in the flickering blue light of the television, but the moment silence reclaimed the room, a sound surfaced, faint initially, a sighing, perhaps, air moving through a constriction, imagination, surely. Then it returned, more defined, a sibilant whisper that seemed to shape itself around my name. Ice bloomed in my veins. I froze, heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My gaze locked onto the taped-over spot. The adhesive square remained, yet its edges seemed looser, subtly buckled, as if pressured from within. Rising, compelled, I stole closer, pressing my ear to the cool plaster. Silence, stretched taut. Then, unmistakably, respiration. Heavy, ragged, impossibly near. A phantom breath behind the gypsum skin. Dismiss it, my rational mind screamed. Stress. Renovation fatigue warps perception. Dust inhalation causes auditory tricks. Yet my name breathed again, blurred but recognizable, a hushed, desperate supplication. My scalp tightened reflexively. I recoiled, stumbling back into the center of the room, adrift in indecision. Perhaps it was just the wind, finding a voice in the building's hollows. With trembling fingers, I peeled back the tape. The aperture seemed wider now, hadn't it? Closer to 4 inches, the darkness within denser. Hesitantly, I leaned in again. ear hovering near the void. A blast of frigid air struck my face, sharp and unnatural, carrying a faint, earthy scent. I shuddered, stepping back. This cold felt invasive, ancient, utterly alien to my urban apartment. And then the voice, clearer this time, shedding ambiguity. My name, distinct, followed by 2 words that resonated in the marrow of my bones. "Help me." My hands began to shake violently. The discarded tape fluttered from my numb fingers to the debris-strewn floor. "Who's there?" I whispered, the sound thin and reedy in the charged quiet. The question hung, unanswered, amplifying the frantic thumping in my chest. Silence pressed in, thick and watchful. Then, softly, urgently, "I need you to come closer." Around me, the apartment felt vast and empty, yet the voice was intimate, immediate, nested just beyond the fragile barrier of the wall. "Breathe," I commanded myself to breathe. One step forward, then another. Slowly, cautiously, I leaned towards the opening again. My index finger extended, probing the darkness, seeking the source of a draft, a hidden pipe, anything mundane. My fingertip met not solid material, but something yielding, damp, and shockingly cold. A subtle pressure, like suction, tugged at my skin. I snatched my hand back as if burned, wiping it frantically on my jeans. Adrenaline surged, a metallic taste flooding my mouth. My breath came in shallow, rapid bursts. "How did you get in there?" The question sounded absurd, even as I voiced it. "Stuck," the voice rasped. "Been here. Please." My gaze darted around the disheveled room. Who could I possibly call? The police? They'd deem me delusional. A building inspector. What could they inspect? The sheer bizarreness of it felt paralyzing. Picturing the conversation. "Officer, there's someone whispering please from inside my drywall." Cemented my isolation. I had to understand more. Leaning in again, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my sternum, I asked, "What do you need me to do?" The reply was fainter, almost lost. "Keep talking to me. Don't leave me." A strange confluence of pity and terror warred within me. The desperation felt achingly real, human even, yet the logistics were impossible. How could a person be entombed within solid masonry? This wasn't some ancient manor with forgotten priest holes. It was a modern building. That section of wall, according to the plans, was structural concrete. For the next hour, I remained tethered to that spot, conversing with the unseen. My questions about its predicament yielded only fragmented pleas for rescue, insistent repetitions of my name, breathless gratitude whenever I promised not to abandon it. My shoulders ached with tension. My eyes scanned the periphery, anticipating what? I didn't know. During that tense vigil, the hole seemed to subtly expand, perhaps another inch gained. Its frangible edges crumbled intermittently, small flakes of plaster whispering to the floor. No tools, no overt force, just a slow, inexorable widening, occasionally punctuated by a faint, dry scraping, like fingernails dragged across stone. Exhaustion began to weigh heavily. The day's stress curdled into nocturnal horror. I told the voice I needed rest. A low whimper answered, a raw sound of fear. "Don't go." I promised I'd return in the morning, the words tasting like lies, even as I spoke them. A pervasive unease vibrated through me. I left a single dim lamp burning in the living room, a frail beacon against the encroaching dark, before retreating to my bedroom. the click of the lock, a mechanism I'd never felt necessary before tonight, sounded pitifully inadequate. Sleep was a shallow, tormented state. Each drift towards unconsciousness was shattered by imagined sounds. Footsteps pacing the hallway outside my door, the scrape intensifying from the living room. 4 times I startled fully awake, heart racing, convinced the barrier had failed. Dawn arrived gray and unwelcome, filtering through the dusty windows. A throbbing headache pulsed behind my eyes. Steeling myself, I ventured back into the living room. The hole gaped wider still, easily 6 inches across now, a ragged wound in the wall. Peering inside, I saw not insulation or studs, but a darkness that seemed to swallow the light, the beginning of some tenebrous passage. Fetching a flashlight from the kitchen, I aimed its beam into the void. The light penetrated only a few feet before being absorbed, revealing rough-hewn walls curving away into deeper shadow. Stone, concrete, impossible to tell. The voice was silent. I called out its name, tentative. Nothing. The day unfolded under a pall of distraction. Silas texted, a family emergency. He wouldn't be back until the following day. The delay felt both like a reprieve and a sentence. I paced the apartment, a prisoner in my own home, drawn back to the hole every few minutes, as if expecting a change. Late afternoon brought faint tapping sounds from within, sporadic, delicate, like hesitant exploration. Crouching, I pressed my ear near the opening once more. The familiar, invasive cold kissed my skin, raising goose flesh. Then the voice returned, softer than before, almost resigned. I'm still here. A breath I hadn't realized I was holding escaped me in a shaky sigh. Who are you? I demanded, the question raw with frustration. A pause stretched, heavy with unspoken things. I don't know, it finally whispered. A profound chill, unrelated to the hole's icy breath, traced its way down my spine. I stared into the inscrutable darkness, the pulse in my temples hammering. I only know, the voice added, its tone thin as stretched thread. I need your help. No explanations, just that stark, repeating need. Frustration surged. I can't help you if I don't know what this is. I snapped, stepping closer. Jagged plaster shards littered the floor around my feet. Please, was the only reply, weaker now, fading. Don't leave. Impulse took over. I had to know more, had to feel the extent of this impossible space. Rolling up my sleeve, I cautiously inserted my arm into the opening, pushing past my elbow. The air inside was viscid with cold and damp. The walls felt coarse, abrasive, like unfinished rock. My searching fingers brushed only emptiness. The cavity extended beyond my reach. Deeper I pushed, ignoring the primal urge to recoil. Then, contact. A feather-light touch against my fingertips, fleeting, impossibly gentle, like another hand reaching, questing. I ripped my arm back, gasping, stumbling away. Goosebumps erupted across my skin. I stared, heart pounding, expecting to see that hand emerge into the dim light. Nothing. My phone buzzed violently in my pocket, making me jump. A friend calling to check in. I mumbled incoherent excuses about being busy, the reality of my situation utterly unspeakable. Glancing back at the wall, I registered that the hole had grown again, perhaps 8 inches now. The floor was a mosaic of fallen plaster and concrete dust. Its expansion was undeniable, slow but relentless. Silas's patch tomorrow would be laughably insufficient. Something had to be done. Evening shadows began their slow creep, reclaiming the corners of the room. The voice regained some strength, its pleas growing more frequent, more desperate. My name, over and over. "Help! Help! So cold!" Pity warred with a deep, visceral terror. I knocked on adjacent walls, listening for hollow sounds, any hint of a hidden corridor or forgotten shaft. Solid, all solid. The building structure felt dense, immutable behind the damaged surface. The situation defied all logic. From my toolbox, I retrieved a crowbar. Perhaps if I widened the opening myself, broke away more plaster, I could see something. The fear of unleashing whatever resided within wrestled with the insistent, pitiful voice. I tapped the wall near the hole with the metal bar. "I can feel you," the voice whispered, startlingly close. My skin crawled. Setting the tool's tip against the fractured edge, I began to pry. Plaster crumbled, cascading down, exposing more of the dark interior. I shone the flashlight beam inside again. The passage seemed clearer now, narrow, extending back several feet before angling sharply to the right. A stronger gust of cold air surged out, biting at my exposed skin, making my eyes water and my teeth chatter involuntarily. "Can you come closer?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. "Closer to the opening?" No answer. I repeated the question. Only a long, drawn-out sigh replied, seeming to originate mere inches from my face. Leaning forward, flashlight beam dancing nervously, I glimpsed it, the pale curve of what looked terrifyingly like a human shoulder, just before it retreated deeper into the shadows. I froze, then scrambled back, sinking to the floor, legs suddenly weak. It was real, physical, not just a voice, not just a draft. Something tangible waited in the wall. I sat there for long minutes, the crowbar heavy in my lap, breath sawing in my chest. "Don't leave me alone," the voice pleaded, its proximity unnerving. Despite the chthonic cold emanating from the hole, sweat beaded on my forehead. "I'm here," I managed, the words thick. I don't know how to get you out." The next hour passed in a blur of exertion and fear. I attacked the wall with the crowbar, chipping away more plaster and underlying material. Dust filled the air, clogging my throat, stinging my eyes. The hole grew, wide enough now to potentially admit my arm and shoulder. The passage beyond looked impossibly tight, snaking away into blackness. "Come in," the voice urged, a silken thread of persuasion. But it was too small, surely too small for a person. I needed heavier tools, a sledgehammer perhaps. Yet the thought of causing structural damage, bringing the whole section down, held me back. Silas was coming tomorrow, but tomorrow felt an eternity away. I stared at the ragged portal I'd carved. It was almost large enough now. The voice was so near I could almost feel its breath, cold and tinged with the smell of damp earth, and something else. Decay? My stomach churned. My mouth was painfully dry. "I'll get a better tool," I croaked, rising unsteadily. "Hang on." But as I turned towards the hall closet, where the sledgehammer lay, the voice rose in sudden panic. "Hurry, it's closing!" Whipping back around, I stared at the hole. Were the edges vibrating, shifting inward? I pressed my hand flat against the wall beside it. A fleeting warmth, then the pervasive cold returned. My mind raced, disoriented. Abandoning caution, I ran to the closet, seized the heavy hammer, and returned. The hole didn't look discernibly smaller, but a consuming urgency clawed at me. I swung the sledgehammer, the impact jarring my arms. Again and again, concrete chunks flew, dust billowed. My muscles screamed in protest. Finally, the opening was wide enough. Crouching low, I could squeeze through. Hesitantly, I pushed my head and shoulders into the breach. The temperature plummeted instantly. My breath plumed white in the flashlight beam. I forced myself further in, scraping against the rough-hewn sides, flashlight held precariously. The passage immediately curved right, just wide enough to crawl, the walls like jagged rock. The frantic pulse in my ears nearly drowned out the voice whispering, "This way, this way." A terrifying magnetism pulled me forward, even as every instinct screamed retreat. My flashlight beam flickered, threatening to die. The cold was agonizing, numbing my fingers, rattling my teeth. I dragged myself another few inches, back pressed hard against one side. A loud scraping sound echoed from deeper within, amplified in the confined space. A leaden dread settled in my gut. What if the wall shifted behind me? Trapped. Could I even turn around in here? Then, the lightest sensation on my shoulder. A touch. I flinched violently, almost dropping the light. The beam swung wildly, illuminating nothing but rough stone. But the presence was undeniable, palpable. The voice, impossibly close, breathed directly into my ear. "Thank you." My skin erupted in prickles. "I can't see you," I cried out, my voice cracking. "Where are you?" "Here," it whispered, and I felt another brush against my arm, a ghostly pressure guiding me onward. I reached my limit. Ragged breaths tore at my lungs. Cold sweat plastered my clothes to my skin. No plan, no way back if this went wrong. My body shook uncontrollably in the crushing confinement. I need help," I stammered. "I'll come back, with someone else." Panic laced the voice now. "Please, no! Don't leave me alone here!" I risked one last look down the tenebrous passage, the flashlight beam revealing only more rough surfaces and impenetrable dark. My heart felt like it might fracture my ribs. With agonizing slowness, I began to back out, shoes scraping, loose debris skittering. "No, don't go," the voice pleaded, rising to a near wail. But raw terror propelled me backward, inch by painful inch. Emerging into my own living room felt like surfacing from icy water. I collapsed against the dust-sheeted couch, gasping, the heavy sledgehammer still clutched in my white-knuckled fist. My entire body trembled. Behind me, the hole yawned, a black mouth exhaling cold air and faint whispers. The voice continued to call my name, weaker now, laced with despair, but I couldn't move, couldn't go back in there, not alone. Logic had fled. Only the chilling reality remained. Something resided within my walls, something ancient or displaced, and it claimed to need me. I would wait for Silas, for morning, for anything other than facing that darkness alone again. I sat there in the dim, dust-filled room, the hammer a useless weight in my lap, my gaze fixed on the gaping aperture. Occasionally, a flicker of movement within the shadows, a colder gust of air. The voice faded, subsided into intermittent, mournful whispers of my name, a sound lonelier than anything I had ever known. Sleep was impossible. I just sat, gripped the hammer, stared into the void, and waited for the dawn. The memory clings like dust to the moment I first breached that forgotten artery of the hospital, a sealed corridor whose existence I hadn't suspected. My realm was the husk of St. Jude's Hospital, a condemned edifice where I served as archivist to the dead, tending shelves sagging under the weight of brittle patient files. I charted the known territories of decay, or so I believed. But one night, deep within the building's skeletal structure, I encountered it. A forbidding metal door terminating a third-floor passage, seemingly welded shut by time and neglect. Rust bloomed across its surface. A stark placard warned, "Restricted, do not enter." A current of pure, unadulterated curiosity surged through me. Countless nights I'd spent immersed in the hospital's spectral history, tracing the faded ink of lives admitted decades prior. What secrets festered beyond this barrier? My coat pocket held the familiar weight of a torch, a necessary companion against the building's failing electrics. Lights flickered like dying synapses, or surrendered entirely to darkness. Demolition loomed mere months away. Repairs were a forgotten luxury. My task, to catalogue the paper ghosts before their eviction to a newer, sterile facility across town. This particular night, I'd lingered, excavating boxes in a cramped storage space. Returning towards my makeshift office, the anomalous door snagged my attention. It wore its age differently. Paint scabbed away at the edges, the handle obscured beneath a patina of grime that spoke of long abandonment. It felt untouched by human hands for an age. Instinctively, my fingers closed around the handle. A tentative twist met unyielding resistance. Applying more pressure coaxed a sharp metallic shriek from within the mechanism. Then, with a groan of tortured metal, it gave. The hinges protested with a grating scrape that set my teeth on edge. My torch beam sliced into the void beyond, revealing a narrow corridor. Its walls wept moisture, paint peeling in long, leprous strips. Dark, ambiguous stains marred the floor tiles. A palpable chill permeated the air, thick with the cloying scent of stale, undisturbed time. I slipped inside, the heavy door sighing shut behind me. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs, a counterpoint to the reassurances I whispered to myself. Just a quick look, mere minutes. The passage constricted around me. My footsteps crunched over a scattering of debris, plaster shards, perhaps fragments of tile. Overhead, fixtures remained stubbornly dark. The torch beam was my sole guide, carving a hesitant path through the oppressive gloom. I passed 2 doorways, gaping maws leading into rooms stripped bare, save for skeletal bed frames and fractured chairs. Their windows were blinded by rough-hewn boards nailed fast from within. No dust motes danced in my light. No recent footprints disturbed the settled grime. Oblivion reigned here. At the corridor's terminus waited another door, this one bearing a tarnished number plate. Corrosion had devoured most of the digits. 317, 377, indecipherable. Yet a flicker of recognition sparked, a vague mention in some obscure file. I'd never encountered such a room designation in the official archives. A jolt, akin to exhilaration, shot through me. Perhaps here lay records overlooked, secrets the hospital itself had forgotten. I tried the handle, stiff, reluctant. Slowly, deliberately, I turned it, pushed. The door swung inward, releasing a faint draft that kissed my face. I stepped into a compact hospital room. A lone bed occupied the far corner, its metal frame archaic, the thin mattress atop it a landscape of stains and tears. Beside it stood an IV pole, barren, no bag attached. The plastic tubing dangled, yet from its vicinity emanated a persistent, rhythmic dripping. Plink, 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 as if fluid met a receptive surface below. Utterly nonsensical. No container, no visible liquid. My torch beam scoured the floor beneath, finding only arid dust. No puddle, no source. Still, the sound persisted, metronomic, maddeningly regular. Venturing deeper, I illuminated relics of outdated medicine. A small metal tray table cluttered with antique syringes, clouded glass vials, a stethoscope seemingly plucked from the 1950s. A fine layer of dust blanketed everything, a delicate gray shroud. I swept the light across the walls. More peeling paint, but here the plaster bore deep, vicious scratches, gouges that looked inflicted by something metallic, something desperate. My chest tightened. The air, heavy and faintly sour, demanded shallow breaths. Placing the torch on the tray table, its beam cutting a static swathe through the gloom, I investigated the drawers. Empty, save for a few yellowed forms dense with illegible script. One bore a date lost to smudged ink. A profound sense of intrusion settled over me. The feeling of trespassing in a place deliberately erased, meant to remain eternally undisturbed. My watch face glowed, nearly midnight. Time to retreat, gather my wits, perhaps return armed with more than just morbid curiosity. Retrieving the torch, I turned back to the door. My hand closed on the knob. It refused to yield. I twisted clockwise, then counter, immovable. Bracing my shoulder against the wood, I shoved. It felt solid, resistant, almost as if counter-pressure were being applied from the corridor side. Panic fluttered, a trapped bird in my ribcage. I fought it down. Stepping back, I played the light over the frame, the ancient hinges. A sharp kick to the lower panel produced a rattle but no release. My heart rate surged. A bead of sweat traced a cold path down my temple. I swiped it away, tried the handle again. Futile. I stood, breathing raggedly, listening to the frantic pulse in my own ears. It was then, amidst my frantic calculations, that a susurrus brushed against the silence, delicate as exhaled breath. Wind? Impossible. The windows were sealed tight. Slowly, pivoting on my heel, I swept the torch beam around the desolate room. The metal bed frame emitted a distinct squeak, though I stood yards away. Then the whisper returned, closer this time, morphing into a faint, drawn-out moan that raised goose flesh along my arms. My mouth turned to parchment. A primal urge screamed within me. Hammer the door, yell for help. But the hour was late. The security guard a distant fixture in his booth by the main entrance. Unlikely to hear anything from this forgotten wing. Control, I told myself. Think. Perhaps the hinges could be forced. My pocket yielded a small folding knife. I knelt, scraping the blade against the rusted hinge pins, trying to work them loose. They resisted, fused by decades of disuse. All the while, the insidious drip continued its maddening cadence. Plink, plink, plink. It crawled beneath my skin, and then the whisper manifested again, louder now, disturbingly intimate, like someone sighing directly beside my ear. I recoiled, spinning violently, the torch beam dancing a frantic jig across the empty bed. The aged metal offered only a dull reflection, A flicker of movement in the corner. Shadow play, surely. My pulse hammered. My palms grew slick with cold sweat. Back to the hinges, scraping, gouging. Minutes bled away, fruitless. I abandoned the knife, hurled my shoulder against the door again, grunting with the effort. Solid, unyielding, trapped. The air grew thick, pressing down on my chest, stealing my breath. The blood roared in my ears, a frantic surf drowning out thought. The whispers seemed to coalesce, multiplying, a faint, sibilant chorus whose words remained tantalizingly obscure. I staggered back, took a running start, and slammed into the door. Pain lanced through my shoulder, radiating down my arm. The door held firm. A curse escaped my lips, swallowed by the oppressive stillness. Fear coiled tighter in my gut, a cold knot of certainty. Entering this place was a profound error. Structural shift, building settling, possible. Yet the wrongness of the room felt sentient, actively hostile. I was not alone. Sweat dripped freely now. My gaze kept darting towards the bed, anticipating something. It remained starkly empty. Only the drip persisted, unwavering. I stalked over to the IV stand, tugged at the dangling tube, searching for some hidden reservoir, some logical explanation. Nothing. Just frayed plastic. Yet the plink, plink echoed on. My heart felt bruised from hammering against my ribs. My hands trembled uncontrollably. I aimed the torch upwards, scanning the stained ceiling tiles for a leak. Dry. Thoughts scattered. Circuit breakers, faulty wiring, irrelevant distractions. Escape was the only imperative. Another whisper breathed against the nape of my neck, accompanied this time by a definite, palpable pressure against my back. A nudge, firm, like a hand shoving me forward. I stumbled, nearly dropping the torch. Whirling around, I slashed the beam through the empty air. Nothing. My throat constricted. Rational thought fractured. The impulse to batter the door warred with the urge to recoil from the unseen presence touching me. My legs felt like water. My palms dripped. Taking several unsteady steps back, I launched myself at the door again. A grinding screech answered the impact, wood protesting against frame, but still it held. Catching my breath, I realized the whispers had ceased. Silence descended, broken only by my own ragged gasps and that damnable drip. I was shaking so violently, the torch beam painted trembling arcs on the walls. I leaned against the bed for support, the cold metal a shocking anchor. Then, another push, harder this time, square in the center of my back. It drove the air from my lungs, slamming me against the bed frame. I gasped, scrambled away, sweeping the light frantically around the room, chest heaving, cornered, prey. How long did this eternity last? Time dilated, stretched thin. Every few minutes, a renewed assault on the door, met with the same implacable resistance. The pulse in my ears became the dominant sound. My watch face glowed. 12:115, then 12:20, then 12:30, each second an agony. The night felt infinite. Finally, desperation dictated brute force. I aimed savage kicks near the handle until my foot throbbed. The metal of the knob bent slightly, but the lock held fast. I roared in frustration, my voice swallowed by the small dead space. Again and again, until agony forced me to stop. At some point I registered a change. The dripping had slowed, each drop now falling with deliberate, amplified weight. Plink. Plink. The echo resonated, burrowing into my raw nerves. A shiver traced its icy path up my spine. The air felt impossibly dense. My head pounded. Closing my eyes, wishing it away, was a tempting surrender, but survival demanded persistence. Summoning a final reserve of strength, I drew back, took a deep, shuddering breath, and drove my heel into the wood directly beside the handle. A satisfying crack. Hope surged. I threw my shoulder against it. The door yielded slightly, then jammed once more. From the corridor beyond, a faint sound drifted, the metallic rumble of a trolley cart. "Hey!" I yelled, voice cracking with desperation. "Help! I'm trapped in here!" The rolling sound faded, dissolving into utter silence. I waited, straining my ears. Nothing. I paced back to the bed, torch beam sweeping the floor, hunting for a loose tile, a hidden panel, any improbable egress. Dust motes swirled in the light, catching in my throat, triggering a racking cough. My lungs felt heavy, constricted. Nausea churned in my stomach. Fight it down. Focus. Suddenly, startlingly distinct in the fraught silence, a small metallic click emanated from the door. Just that, heart hammering against my ribs, I whipped around, torch beam finding the handle. I advanced cautiously. My chest felt impossibly tight. Reaching out a trembling hand, I grasped the knob and turned. It moved freely. I pulled. The door yielded, swinging inward perhaps an inch. I held my breath, braced for it to slam shut again. It remained open. Pulling it wider revealed not the Stygian gloom of the corridor, but the pale, washed-out light of dawn filtering through the grimy, boarded panes. I stepped out, disoriented, into air that felt blessedly neutral, the stale odor vanquished. Turning instinctively to check my watch, I saw its hands were perfectly still, frozen at 12:30, the precise moment my ordeal truly began. Standing in the corridor, bathed in the weak morning light, confusion warred with relief. The debris remained underfoot, but the menacing aura had dissipated. I looked back at the door I'd just exited. The sign, once proclaiming restriction, was now utterly blank, as if the letters themselves had fled. Stepping back, I swept the torch beam around, a redundant gesture now. What had transpired? The damp chill of sweat clung to my collar. My heart still galloped, but freedom tasted sweet. My phone, retrieved with fumbling fingers, displayed the impossible truth. Nearly 7 a.m. An abyss of hours had vanished, swallowed whole, while my wristwatch remained stubbornly fixed. A liar frozen at 12:30. I fled that corridor, my legs unsteady, casting nervous glances over my shoulder. Back in the relative sanctuary of my office, I locked the door, collapsing into the worn desk chair, breath sawing in my throat. My phone showed no missed calls, no messages. No one had noticed my absence. I drank deeply from a water bottle, my gaze falling on the stacks of files, the mundane reality of my work now seeming utterly alien. The urge to flee, to go home and hide, was potent, yet a stronger compulsion insisted. Document this. I seized a pen, paper trembling in my grasp, and poured out every detail. The rusted door, the weeping corridor, the stained bed, the phantom drip, the insidious whispers, the malevolent resistance of the door, its inexplicable release. My heart pounded in time with the scratching pen. My hand shook. When the account was finished, I noticed the watch still strapped to my wrist, its face eternally proclaiming 12:30. Winding it, tapping it, proved useless. It was broken, or perhaps something more. I unfastened the strap, laid the dead timepiece on the desk. Around me, the hospital settled back into its familiar guise, an old structure succumbing gracefully to gravity and time, punctuated by flickering lights and peeling paint. Distant traffic hummed, a reminder of the world outside. Soon, the meager day shift would arrive. Perhaps it was hallucination, stress-induced delusion, yet the memory of that pressure on my back, the suffocating tightness in my chest, the relentless plink, plink, plink from an IV stand feeding nothing. These sensations felt terrifyingly real. I never returned to that corridor. My contract concluded a few weeks later. I boxed the records, dispatched them to their new home, and walked away from St. Jude's. The room, 317, 377, remained unmentioned in any official inventory. It couldn't be. No chart, map, or blueprint acknowledged its existence, an anomaly the hospital itself seemed determined to excise. Sometimes, in the dead quiet of night, the phantom drip echoes in my mind. Plink, plink, plink. A chilling reminder of the helplessness, the whispers, the hours stolen in that room. The watch remains on my desk, forever fixed at 12:30, a silent testament to the porous boundary between the known world and the secrets that fester, undisturbed, in forgotten corners. "3 weeks. That's how long the venerable walls of this pile have held me, a newcomer amidst its shadowed history. Whispers circulated, tales of corridors that snaked into confusion, swallowing residents seeking their own doors. Idle gossip, I'd thought, the fanciful embroidery of age. Tonight, certainty phrase. Tonight I've encountered an impossibility, a portal of corroded iron, jammed into a recess within a hallway that materialized from the familiar map of my floor. The hour is late. A primal instinct screams retreat. Yet here I stand, transfixed before this unbidden threshold. The question of entry, a heavy weight in the silence. The building's eccentric geometry revealed itself early, on my second day navigating its veins. Passageways coiled with perplexing logic. Mastering the route from vestibule to my own small haven was an exercise in memory. The wallpaper, brittle and patterned with faded glories, curled away from the plaster like ancient parchment. Floorboards offered sighs and groans beneath my weight. The ceiling fixtures shed only a grudging, weak light. Stray from the known path, and you'd find yourself abruptly halted by a cul-de-sac, a blank wall where passage ought to be. Historic charm, some called it. Returning late, alone, it felt more like a subtle menace. Earlier this evening, laden with groceries, I took a wrong turn. The passage near the stairwell seemed subtly altered, the lights stuttering in their sockets. An unfamiliar door materialized, briefly alarming, until it resolved into a mundane service closet I swore hadn't occupied that space moments before. A tremor of the uncanny, easily dismissed. Fatigue, I told myself, the day's labor blurring perception. I craved only the solace of my rooms, never suspecting this minor disorientation was but a prelude, a stage being set in the shadows. Sleep refused its solace around midnight. Stillness pressed in, the air within my apartment thick and stagnant. Restlessness coiled tight, propelling me out into the dim corridors, armed with only a meager pocket torch. I bypassed the main hall lights, intending just a brief circuit, a stroll to clear my head. Past the silent elevator cage I went, turning right, then left into a familiar passage typically terminating at a locked storage space. But tonight, the corridor stretched onward, refusing its usual end. The air grew dense, freighted with the scent of settled dust and time-steeped timber. Hesitantly, I advanced. A few paces more, and there it was, hugging the right-hand wall. The iron door. Ancient, its surface weeping trails of umber rust. No markings, no number, no clue to its purpose. I pressed my ear close, listening into the profound silence beyond. My hand reached for the handle. It yielded with a protesting shriek of long undisturbed hinges. Beyond the complaining metal lay a spiral staircase, plunging into absolute darkness. My torch beam sliced downward, illuminating steps forged from the same dark iron, narrow and stark. It evoked images of forgotten industrial basements, though I resist the urge to romanticize its appearance. It looked simply precarious, worn, as though my weight might prove its undoing. Yet it held. A tremor ran through me, not entirely from cold. My pulse quickened, my palm slick against the torch's casing. Retreat whispered reason, but the mystery of this hidden descent exerted a stronger pull. My first step onto the spiral sang out, a metallic resonance in the enclosed space. A chill traced my spine, the air suddenly damp and subterranean. The torch carved a small, swimming circle of visibility from the overwhelming black. A glance back confirmed the doorway remained open, a rectangle of faint hallway light. A part of me wanted to secure it, but it hung heavy, unlikely to stay ajar unaided. Scrabbling on the floor yielded a shard of debris, perhaps a fractured piece of molding, which I wedged firmly between the door and its frame. A flimsy safeguard, yet a comfort. Then, downward I went. Initially, I anticipated a boiler room, perhaps some disused cellar space, but the spiral persisted, winding deeper, ever deeper. After perhaps 2 complete revolutions, I arrived upon a narrow landing. A cramped corridor branched off, barely shoulder width, ceiling oppressively low, walls of rough, age-darkened brick. My light swept across a floor, layered with dust and fine grit. No adornment, no function apparent. This felt alien, divorced from the building's known structure. And ahead, the spiral staircase continued its inexorable descent. I hesitated, glancing back towards the unseen upper reaches, then peered into the short, dark corridor. An inexplicable urge arose to explore this tangent before descending further. I ventured into the passage, each footfall a soft crunch on the detritus littering the floor. The air here felt heavier still, catching in my throat, provoking a dry cough. 20 feet in, perhaps, a closed wooden door blocked the left wall. The old iron knob refused to turn. I leaned my weight against the wood. It felt utterly sealed, immovable. Defeated, I retreated towards the stairs, my own breathing suddenly loud, echoing unnervingly in the confined space. My pulse drummed a frantic rhythm in my ears, a prickle of unease. Something was wrong. Looking up, I realized the doorway, my point of entry, was gone. I could trace the spiral upward for maybe 3 turns before it vanished into impenetrable shadow. A wave of cold washed over me. Calm, I told myself. Just climb back. Yet a stubborn curiosity, or perhaps a dawning fear, urged me onward, just a little farther. I would be cautious, I vowed. The first sign of true strangeness, and I would turn back. So, down I went again. I counted steps initially, seeking pattern in the descent. Footfall, clang, echo, landing. But this flight felt longer, the spiral tighter, disorienting. My right hand instinctively found the central column for balance. 50 steps, maybe more, brought me to another landing. It was identical. The same rough brick, the same low ceiling, the same short corridor, leading off to the side. A swift inspection revealed another locked wooden door, identical to the first. My breathing grew ragged, sweat cooling on my neck. The torch beam danced slightly in my unsteady hand. "Turn back now," reason insisted, but the enigma held me fast. Was this some forgotten sub-basement or something stranger still? I resumed the descent. This time, counting failed me as a new element intruded. Sound. A faint hiss, initially, like escaping steam or air sighing through a hidden vent. I froze, holding my breath, leaning against the cold metal railing. The sound seemed to emanate from below, yet the acoustics warped its origin, making it feel omnipresent. My light probed the darkness beneath. Only more spiraling steps met the beam. Onward. Tension knotted my shoulders, my mind conjuring phantoms at the periphery of the light, fleeting shapes that resolved into the curve of the stairs, the play of shadows. Several more rotations, and I emerged onto yet another landing, a perfect replica of the last two. The realization struck with chilling force. The architecture was repeating. Each level offered the same cramped corridor, the same sealed door, the same oppressive ceiling. It defied logic. I expected a foundation, a final level, but found only endless descent. The hissing intensified, punctuated now by what sounded disturbingly like whispers, fragmented susurrations lost in the echoes. I couldn't decipher them, but their presence prickled my skin. My heart hammered against my ribs. A frantic drumbeat felt in my temples. I swept the torch beam around wildly. Nothing. The corridor remained empty, the locked door impassive. "Hello?" My voice sounded thin, swallowed instantly by the oppressive silence, only a distorted fragment echoing back. Wiping sweat from my brow, I knew, finally, I had to ascend. Climbing proved strangely taxing. Each upward step felt like pushing through denser air. My head swam, my breathing turned shallow. Pausing, gripping the rail, I heard the hissing again, louder now, closer. My hands trembled. I aimed the torch upward. The spiral ascended into blackness, but the steps seemed narrower, the darkness more profound. How far had I come? It felt like leagues, like hours. My sense of direction dissolved. I forced myself upward, step by careful step, counting again to anchor my mind. 1, 2, 3. But the numbers soon blurred. The whispers seemed to circle me now, weaving through the metallic echoes. My torch flickered. A sharp rap with my palm restored its beam, but it shone weaker, yellower. My phone. The realization hit me like a blow. Left charging, forgotten, in my apartment. Foolish. Time lost its shape. I climbed and climbed, the landings recurring with maddening regularity, each indistinguishable from the last. The entry door never reappeared. Sometimes I'd pause, look down into the swirling abyss, seeing nothing but the receding helix of iron. My own footsteps, my ragged breathing, became the soundscape, punctuated by that insidious hissing, which sometimes sharpened into phantom exhalations near my ear. I spun around more than once, finding only empty air. Exhaustion forced me to rest on one landing, leaning against the damp, cold brick. A drop of condensation traced a path down my neck. I didn't even glance down the corridor. I knew its secret. Another locked door. A certainty settled. This place was a loop, a trick of geometry, perhaps. Or something worse? Was the building itself playing with me, trapping me in some hidden, infinite fold? I sat on the topmost step of the next flight down, or was it up, and listened. The whispers had receded slightly, distant murmurs now, but the hissing remained, a constant faint sibilance. My mouth was parched, my throat raw, the torch beam visibly dimmed. I had to keep moving, had to try to find the way back. Rising on shaky legs, I gripped the railing and climbed again. Every few steps, a frantic scan of my surroundings. The identical corridors mocked me. On one landing, frustration boiled over. I kicked the locked door, the impact jarring my leg, the door remaining stubbornly shut. "Help!" The cry was absorbed, returning as a hollow, distorted echo. Panic constricted my chest, short, sharp gasps escaping my lips despite my efforts to control them. I don't know how long I struggled. Direction became arbitrary. The relentless spiral induced vertigo. Was I ascending or descending? The landings blurred into one monotonous, repeating nightmare. My flashlight flickered violently, died, then flared back to feeble life when I shook it desperately. My stomach churned. A burning ache settled deep in my shoulders. My shirt clung, soaked in cold sweat. On another identical landing, I pressed my ear to the cold wood of the locked door, straining for any sound. Pipes gurgling, distant voices, anything from the normal world. A faint hiss answered, followed by a low chuckle, so fleeting I wondered if I'd imagined it. I recoiled, heart seizing. Turning back to the stairs, I was paralyzed by indecision. Up, down, my torch beam, aimed first one way then the other, revealed only the same vista. Iron steps curling into shadow, brick walls weeping dampness, air thick with stale silence. Trapped. "There has to be an end," I whispered, my voice trembling. Choosing a direction I prayed was upward, I managed a few steps before halting. The hissing surged, swirling around me, seeming to emanate from the very air. My chest tightened painfully. My fingertips felt numb. Looking up, looking down, the distinction had vanished. The staircase stretched above and below into a seamless vortex of shadows. I forced myself onward, driven now by sheer animal instinct, searching for any variation, any door that might yield, any sign of egress. Surely the building had limits, a foundation, a roof, but the torch beam faltered again, the circle of light shrinking, dimming. My lungs burned, starved for clean air. Hyperventilation threatened to overwhelm me. Calm down, calm down. Then, with a final, pathetic flicker, the light died. Utter blackness descended. My pulse roared in my ears, a deafening internal thunder. Groping blindly, my hand found the cold, smooth metal of the central column. I moved by touch alone, testing each step before trusting my weight. Tears pricked my eyes. I brushed them away angrily. How could this be real? Yet the cold iron under my fingers, the damp chill on my skin, the oppressive dark, it was undeniable. One slow, tentative step after another, hoping for a glimmer of light, the familiar shape of the wedged open door. Hours might have passed. Time is meaningless here. My throat aches with every breath of stagnant air. My muscles scream with fatigue. Occasionally, I pause, straining my ears against the silence, but only my own ragged breathing and those soft, insidious whispers answer. They never cease, swirling like currents in the dark, sometimes louder, sometimes receding, a constant sibilant presence. I talk to myself, fragments of encouragement. Stay calm, keep moving. But my voice is small, swallowed by the immensity of this place. I'm resting now, on another landing identical to all the others. The walls are cold, damp stone against my back. I see nothing. My torch is dead weight. My phone, a world away. Alone, adrift in this echoing darkness. Sometimes, a fleeting phosphorescence seems to glimmer in the distance, but it vanishes the moment I focus on it. My heart pounds with a painful intensity. The hissing feels closer now, like hot breath on my neck, yet turning reveals only more empty dark. Exhaustion weighs me down, body and mind fraying. I keep expecting, hoping, to find that final door, or the iron one I foolishly entered, but the spiral offers only more steps, more landings, more locked doors. Am I trapped eternally in this helical purgatory, with only whispers for company? Will I ever find my way back? Is there even a way back? All that remains is to climb, or perhaps descend, and pray that somewhere, somehow, this nightmare yields an exit. Until then, there is only the dark, the endless stairs, and the sibilant breath of whatever dwells within them.